Today's briefing focuses on recent developments in U.S. foreign policy and global engagements, with an emphasis on how Washington is interacting with other nations and responding to international challenges. I will walk you through 5 major episodes, then provide broader context on evolving U.S. international relations. 1. U.S. diplomacy with Bolivia and Iran's influence. Our first story concerns U.S. efforts to curb Iranian influence in Latin America. The United States has been actively pressing the government of Bolivia to expel suspected Iranian intelligence operatives and to formally designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with Hezbollah and Hamas, as terrorist organizations. This push is part of a larger campaign to reduce Tehran's geopolitical footprint in the Western Hemisphere and reinforce security ties with regional partners. This diplomatic initiative follows broader U.S. strategy in Latin America, including earlier pressure on governments in Ecuador and Argentina to take similar counter-Iran measures, and developments tied to U.S. actions in Venezuela earlier this year. In effect, Washington aims to weaken networks affiliated with Tehran that could be seen as threatening to Western Hemisphere stability, while encouraging Bolivian political alignment with U.S. policy priorities. 2. U.S. naval outreach in Southeast Asia. Cambodia. Turning to Southeast Asia, the U.S. Navy's USS Cincinnati made a notable port call at Cambodia's Ream Naval Base, which has been significantly rebuilt with Chinese investment. This visit marks the first time an American warship has docked at the base since the renovation, a move that Washington describes as a confidence-building measure in U.S.-Cambodian military relations. The diplomatic signal here is clear. Amid strategic competition with China in the Indo-Pacific, the United States is seeking to maintain a presence and demonstrate that its partnerships in the region remain active. Phnom Penh, for its part, has reiterated the base is open to all friendly nations, even as China's footprint continues to grow. 3. U.S. role in Gaza ceasefire diplomacy. Next, in the Middle East, U.S. envoys are pressing for progress on the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan involving Israel and Egypt. Senior U.S. envoys, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to urge movement into the next stage of the ceasefire, a step that includes reopening the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt and advancing monitoring mechanisms as outlined in the broader peace framework. This diplomatic engagement supports U.S. efforts to stabilize Gaza's humanitarian situation and shift toward reconstruction and longer-term administrative arrangements. Opening border access and reducing hostilities have been central to this effort, even as violence and political friction persist on the ground. 4. U.S.-Europe relations and Arctic diplomacy. In Europe, a bipartisan delegation of U.S. lawmakers traveled to Denmark amid ongoing tensions related to U.S. policy toward Greenland. These lawmakers met Danish and Greenlandic officials to lower the temperature of diplomatic tensions after controversial U.S. rhetoric about future access to or control over the Arctic island. The broader context includes high-level disputes over U.S. ambitions in the Arctic region and the strategic importance of Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, for defense and mineral resources. Copenhagen and Nuuk have emphasized respect for sovereignty and alliance commitments, even as Washington asserts strategic interests in the area. This episode highlights not only the complexity of transatlantic relations but also the domestic and multinational pushback that can shape U.S. foreign policy beyond immediate strategic objectives. 5. Domestic debate over U.S. foreign policy direction. Within the United States, there is a vigorous debate about the direction and consistency of U.S. foreign policy. Analysts and commentators have raised concerns about rapid shifts in diplomatic posture, centralized decision-making by the executive branch, and the effects these have on long-term alliances and multilateral cooperation. Issues such as the handling of Arctic diplomacy, engagement in Gaza and the broader Middle East, and relationships with NATO allies have become focal points of discussion among scholars, commentators, and policy professionals. Critics warn that unpredictability in policy can weaken trust and undermine long-standing partnerships. Strategic U.S. international partnerships. Stepping back, the United States continues to navigate a changing global environment with both old and emerging partners. U.S.-India strategic partnership. The United States and India have continued deepening cooperation across defense, technology, and trade, a pillar of Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy. U.S.-Nigeria diplomatic reset. Recent diplomatic tensions with Nigeria were reportedly resolved, laying groundwork for renewed cooperation in health and bilateral engagements. Global perceptions. Public opinion globally varies on the U.S. role in world affairs, seen by some as a stabilizing force and by others as overly interventionist, reflecting divergent regional perspectives. These trends illustrate the breadth and complexity of U.S. foreign relations today. In summary, U.S. foreign policy in early 2026 is characterized by active engagement and strategic competition, coupled with debate and revaluation. From countering Iranian influence in Latin America to navigating Indo-Pacific security, advancing Middle East ceasefire efforts, and managing transatlantic diplomatic tensions, Washington's global posture remains both ambitious and contested. This concludes today's